What's up, people? My name is Connor. This is the Connor Green Podcast. And today we're talking about training levels. We're going to talk about what they are, why they matter. As usual, well, not necessarily as usual, but just like the podcast I did on pull-ups, I wrote a companion article on training levels. It's on the website at sparkfitness.com. On our blog, you can take a look at it. It covers a few key considerations, what the different training levels are, how lifters can utilize them to make progress, how coaches need to utilize them, and some pre-reading. I can tell you right now, no one on earth is talking about training levels enough. Now, what is a training level? A training level is how advanced you are in the gym. Now, you might say that level of training advancement, your stage of training. It's very simple how we break it down, and I'm going to go into that framework, how you can utilize it for the best results possible real short. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to get right into it. There are broadly 3 stages of training that will apply to 99% of the whole world. Simply, this is a framework for illustrating how advanced someone is and how far along they are in their development as a lifter and athlete. It is extremely important to know that your training level has nothing to do with how strong you are. You can be a novice and be squatting 400. You can be advanced and be squatting 150. Your training level has to do with the type and amount of stress that you can recover from, adapt to, and ultimately what it takes for you to improve optimally or to set that PR. Some gifted athletes will be able to take a novice style of training to squatting 400 for reps. People that are older, smaller, or less athletic may require advanced training to get to 150. This is oftentimes a fatal training mistake that people make that significantly hinders their progress. Training levels has nothing to do with how much you've read, how knowledgeable you are, or how long you've been in the gym. There are tons of 10-year lifters, people that have been in the gym 10, 15, 20 years, that have tons of book knowledge that will be beginners forever. And this is something I'm writing a new article about. I'll do some content on about the curse of the 10-year beginner. And it's because they've never followed an appropriate training plan, and that potentially includes diet, long enough to actually progress through the level. It's very easy. What I can say is an advanced program or an advanced style of training doesn't work for a beginner. You could be a beginner for 10 years, always working on an advanced training program. If you want to advance in your training level, you need to do a beginning program as long as you can, and then move into an intermediate, and then move into an advanced style training. So with that being said, training levels, super simple. We have novice, which means beginner, intermediate, and advanced. There is a section I've carved out in there called elite. I don't think that's pertinent to this particular podcast and article, but I may cover that another time. Now, it's so important to talk about this because there's almost no understanding of the stages of training amongst lifters and athletes and gym members and clients and coaches in the world at all. And this is the reason almost no one makes substantial long-term progress in the gym. As I mentioned earlier, there's an epidemic of lifetime novices that no matter how long someone's in the gym or how consistent they are or how hard they try, 99% of people will be novices no matter what, because they do not know about nor understand how to train according to their training level. And to put it plainly, you will always be a beginner until you do a beginner program, until that program does not produce further results for you. No matter how faithful you are to it, no matter how perfect you are with your training and your recovery, doing an advanced program will never make you advance. Doing a beginner program until you're an intermediate, and then doing an intermediate program until you're advanced is what gets you advanced. Doing an advanced program as a novice will ensure you stay a beginner for life. Further complicating matters, something called the novice effect. Working on another article and podcast about this. And this is crucial for everybody to understand. The novice effect. Anything works when you're a beginner. Anything. If you're off the couch, riding your bike will make your bench press go up. If you're off the couch, doing anything results in lots of improvement in all facets of your fitness. This is because you're taking a completely unadapted organism and providing it any sort of stress at all, and it will adapt. This is a huge reason why so many exercise studies are bullshit. Very often, studies test complete beginners for like 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks. And anything works in the short term when you're a beginner. And the more beginner you are, the better anything works. So you really can't tell if something is effective or not if it works on a beginner. It's about what happens after someone is a total beginner, where that info starts to become insightful and important. Unfortunately, most studies lack the logistical support to do that. Luckily, there exist gyms and coaches like ours, which function as practical studies, practical, pragmatic studies of large groups of people from all different types of backgrounds for 10 plus years. Okay, so now that I have that message out of the way, let's really begin on the actual meat and potatoes here of training levels. So you can break them down into subgroups. We've got beginner, novice, right, intermediate, and then advanced. So if we break down and do an analysis of the novice category, we can break that further down into 3 categories of novices. There's a rank novice, a novice, and an advanced novice. A rank novice is a total beginner with no experience at all, or has a physical state that presents that way. I.e., if you're 80 years old and you haven't trained in 50 years, that person probably can't do an air squat without falling down, falling over. And a regular rank novice, not an extreme case, will advance to becoming a novice within just a few weeks of proper training. Both a rank novice and a novice are starting positions. So a novice is a typical beginner. So we got that rank novice and then novice. A novice has some experience in the gym, played some sports growing up, has had stints in the gym, and they have regular average athletic ability. A novice will advance to becoming an advanced novice with 6 to 12 months of proper training. Sadly, very, very few people that go to the gym, no matter how hard they work or how long they go, no matter how sore they get, will never actually even become an advanced novice, even though it doesn't take very long with proper training. Now, a fair range for that might be 3 to 18 months, and that depends on numerous factors we can go into. Advanced novice cannot be reached without proper training. So you can go from, being a rank novice to a novice, doing almost anything. Like I mentioned, anything will work if you are untrained or deconditioned enough. Anything works at all, and you can become a novice. But that is where the majority of people stay, and it's not due to a lack of hard work. It's due to a lack of understanding about the program that they should be doing. I've trained numerous clients, way too many to count, and that doesn't count the number of stories I've heard or what I've seen or heard from friends of friends of friends of friends, at the number of beginners that do an advanced program and don't see results. All they see is intense soreness, a lot of hard work, and they don't get the results that are commensurate with the work that they're putting in. And it's because they're doing an intermediate program that does not line up with their training level. So an advanced novice is starting to need some changes in their programming in order to continue making progress beyond the novice linear progression. If you don't know what the novice linear progression is, I've done other articles and podcasts on that. Very quickly, I will say here, it is the most simple version of training that is the most appropriate for novices in the gym, that will get them out of that novice phase and into intermediate as fast as possible. Now, all novices share a few important characteristics. Listen to these characteristics to try to determine where you are, where your client is, so you can assign them the most appropriate program and type of training, or you can do that on your own. So novices have a few important characteristics. They need regular coaching to keep their form from breaking down and returning to pre-coaching levels. Now, I've seen this a million times. Train someone for 2 weeks. If you're doing a personal training session, they start training and you correct them like 10 times, and then they can have a good squat for the rest of the session. Now, if you take that person and have them warm up on their own in the gym, they look like they've never squatted before at all. And it's because they needed those quick cues and that quick oversight in order to have a good session. If that's you, if you go and train on your own and your form starts to get worse, then you're definitely in a novice phase. Now, if they, as I said, if they have proper live coaching and cueing, the form remains solid. It's very common for a novice to be corrected and then maintain good form, but without those corrections, it can digress back to being pretty bad form. Novices just don't have the neural adaptations in their brain to have correct form all the time without that external feedback. Next, a novice can set a PR every single time they train. I've covered this before. If you are a beginner in the gym, you should be setting a personal record on all of your strength lifts every single time you go to the gym. If you're doing a program that calls for a PR every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, or 12 weeks, you're wasting your time. You're doing an advanced level of training when you could be setting 3 or 4 PRs a week for 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 months. Now, I am the number one person to say that I messed this up for years thinking I was advanced. I was a gym owner and was still a beginner. I had been training for 10 plus years harder than anyone I knew. And I was still a beginner in the gym because I was constantly trying to not be a beginner by skipping ahead to intermediate or advanced training. For example, if a novice squats 3 sets of 5 on Monday for 150, and that's the most weight they've ever done in their whole life, they can recover and adapt and set a new PR set of 5 on Wednesday at 155. And they should do that as long as they possibly can, because that represents the fastest rate of improvement you can have. Monday, you squat 150. Wednesday, you squat 155. Friday, you squat 160. It is very common and a typical result for a regular adult male to go from never having squatted to over 300 pounds in 6 months doing that. No need for periodization, no need for anything fancy, no need for crazy soreness, literally just by going up 5 pounds of workout. That's the power of a beginner doing a beginner program. Intermediates and advanced can't do that. It's not that they don't want to, they physically can't. I'll expand on that below when we cover intermediates and advanced, but a short summary is this. If an intermediate squats a PR set of 5 or 3 sets of 5 on Monday at 355, they physically can't recover and squat again to set a PR on Wednesday. It's impossible. A beginner can. They squat Monday. They don't necessarily have the neural adaptations to have the form and the intensity to push themselves to a point to where they could not set a PR on Wednesday if they wanted to. Intermediates can't. So if you can go to the gym and you squat 165 on Monday for 3 sets of 5, and you are recovered and able to set a PR of 3 sets of 5 of 170, that's 5 pounds on Wednesday, you are still a beginner. And the only way that you will grow beyond being a beginner is if you allow yourself to do that type of training for 3 or 6 or 9 or 12 months until it stops working, until you do your squats on Monday. And no matter how hard you recover, Wednesday, you can't PR. It would be physically impossible. That is a key occurrence that would let you know, or as coaches could let you know about your athletes, that they may need to be moving on to intermediate training. So the general rule, novices can PR on a daily basis. Intermediates can only PR on a weekly basis. Okay? Overtraining is not a real concern for novices because at this point, 1 or 2 days off will right the ship. They're not going to ruin their training for weeks if they happen to dip into some overtraining. But obviously, if a novice is overtraining regularly, they won't progress. Overtraining becomes a much bigger issue the more advanced you are. Additionally, for novices, overtraining is way more than likely just under recovering. Depending on what age, height, weight, athletic ability, the ideal number of times for a novice to train per week is probably 2 to 3 for 30 to 60 minutes. There's a boatload of people that will not progress because they put forth, whether it's ego driven or just being mistaken, they would rather train 5 days a week for 90 minutes for less results. When the fastest way for you to get better in the gym as a novice is a lower volume of training 2 to 3 days a week for 30 to 60 minutes. Now, some nutrition considerations for novices. Now, the diet for an overweight novice can be different from a skinny novice, but it doesn't need to be. But a skinny novice's diet must be different from the overweight novice. So if you are overweight, I'm about to make a point that is completely misunderstood and misrepresented. If you have excess body, if you have weight to lose, you can lift weights and lose weight pretty easily. You can eat in a caloric deficit. You can still add weight to the bar every session. You'll build muscle and you will have a lot of success doing that. You can do this with almost no effect to your strength gains because you're using stored body fat to make up the difference in the caloric deficit of your diet. This could continue until that lifter is no longer overweight. And when they're at a healthy body weight, they'll need to change their eating habits to line up with gaining muscle in order to continue progressing. Now, an overweight novice could eat in maintenance or maybe a baby surplus. Their body composition will continue to improve greatly from the quick addition of a bunch of muscle. They'll continue to raise their TDEE, the total number of calories they burn living day to day. They don't have to do that though, but they can. It's up to the coach and the lifter. Now, skinny novices cannot do that unless they want to make very slow or no progress and be very sore and tired all the time. Skinny novices do not have the excess body fat with which to make up for a caloric deficit. Well, how do you do that? You need to eat more calories and rely on carbs for energy. I blame this on the idea that if you can just cut weight enough, you'll look great. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The skinny novice needs to build muscle first and foremost, and this will help them the most with their aesthetics. Now, I used to be a skinny novice, and I was determined to stay there, although I didn't really understand that at the time. You need to eat more food than you want to in this case. This is what will allow you to build muscle, and in many cases, Through adding weight and building muscle, you become leaner and you get strong and progress. Attempting to stay the same weight or worse, cut weight as someone that is skinny already is a fool errand. Listen to me when I say this. No amount of dieting will reveal a physique you don't have. This is an important consideration for intermediates as well, although less so. The reason for this is because most lifters are starting to find their frame through weight loss or fill into their frame by building body weight by the time they're becoming intermediates. But although occasionally weight will still need to be lost or gained. This depends on the individual's ultimate goals, height, weight, etc. Ultimately, you become an intermediate by building enough muscle. And it's really that simple. If you refuse to build muscle, whether you know it or not, you won't advance. Now, I know refuse is a strong word, but that's the reality. If you're scared to put on weight, then you're scared to build muscle. And you are, whether you realize it or not, choosing to be a lifetime novice despite all of your hard work. Moving on, intermediates. The intermediate category can be broken down into beginner intermediate, intermediate, and advanced intermediate. Intermediates can only PR on a weekly basis. A beginner intermediate may be able to PR every 3 to 4 days, but could still set more than one PR per week. So maybe they can PR on Monday and Friday. Whereas a novice could PR their squat on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday each time. A beginner intermediate may find that they cannot recover from that workload, but they can still set a couple PRs a week instead of 3. If that's the case, it's an indication that that lifter is now a beginning intermediate lifter and will require some programming changes to continue to progress maximally. But you should not do that until you get evidence for it. Switching a beginner or a novice to an intermediate program does not cause them to get results faster. It causes them to get results slower. Stay on a beginner program as long as you can if you want to get results as fast as you can. And eventually, begrudgingly, against your will, your body will show you that you can't PR on a daily basis, and you will need to start smoothly transitioning from an advanced novice to a beginner intermediate style program. Eventually, the lifter will not be able to set multiple PRs per week, and it will literally just be one. This is the mark of a true intermediate lifter that requires intermediate programming. The intermediate may be able to set a weekly PR for years. If you are stuck, if you are not a crazy strong and you are stuck not PRing on a weekly basis in the gym, something is going wrong. Your recovery, your programming style, there's something off. Regardless of how old you are, if you're 50, 60, doesn't matter. Once you're an intermediate, you can still set that weekly PR for a very long time. Now, an advanced intermediate lifter may not be able to set a weekly PR, but can still progress steadily, setting a PR every 8 to 14 days. This doesn't require a jump to to advanced programming at this point, although that is very often a costly mistake. Hey, we're almost advanced and try to skip ahead. But every single being on earth can reach the intermediate training levels, but almost no one does. Lifters at the intermediate training levels share a few characteristics, okay? Their form requires minimal critique to maintain, and they can make form changes in the middle of a set if necessary. That's really how I start to know if an intermediate lifter is actually intermediate. If they do a rep and I say, hey, do this, and the next rep they fix it, that shows a lot of kinesthetic awareness and the ability to change your form in the middle of a set. An intermediate lifter can also probably way more than likely train on their own with a 95% certainty that they're retaining their hard-earned form. Now, they might need to make adjustments from time to time that require some live feedback or even video feedback, but they're capable of recognizing if they made a form mistake kinetically or from watching a video. They also have the ability to have a bad rep 1 and improve on that in rep 2, often without a coaching cue. They can only PR 1 time a week. They can only PR on a weekly basis, no matter how incredible the coaching, programming, and recovery. Okay. If you can set 3 PRs a week, you're a beginner, and you should go back to beginner programming because that's the fastest you're ever going to be able to see results ever. Would you rather faster improvement for the ego of being able to say, well, I'm intermediate or I'm advanced because I've been in the gym for 20 years? There are 20 and 30-year novices out there. There are. And that pains me. I wish I could talk to that person and help them get on a program that will actually help advance to the level of the training that they're attempting to do. With intermediates, their neural adaptation, i.e. their mental strength, are very strong. And they're so strong that they can provide a very intense training stimulus in one session, and they cannot recover and adapt on less than 4 to 5 days of rest, and they may need up to 14. And again, that's not optional. If I train so hard on Monday that I can't recover by Friday, or that I need 4 or 5 days in order to set that PR on Friday, I'm an intermediate. But if I'm a beginner and I overload myself and I don't recover and I can't recover by Friday, that doesn't mean I'm an intermediate. That means I'm not recovering well. So an intermediate is someone that sleeps, manages their stress, hydrates, eats all the food that they need to, does everything correctly, is capable of squatting Monday, but needs until Friday to recover. Under recovering is not evidence that you're more advanced. When it comes to intermediates, obviously 1 week is not a hard and fast rule. 4 to 14 days is a good indicator of intermediate status. Any less, and they're either an advanced novice, or as I mentioned, they're under recovering. And any more, say more than 14 days, it could be a problem of recovery, usually is, or it's evidence that they're being at the advanced training stage. But intermediates need significantly more rest than sets, rests between sets than novices. Muscle building happens with 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes of rest. Very, very often people are using way too short of rest periods. Intermediates are likely to need at least 5 minutes to completely recover from a heavy set of 5, and sometimes up to 8 to 10 minutes. They have the form, mental strength, and physical ability to push themselves so intensely in a set that they need that extra time to rest. Novices oftentimes remark that they're ready to do another set in 60 seconds or less, or that a heavy set of 5 isn't enough. They lack the physical or mental ability to lift something heavy enough and push through something difficult enough for it to be that stressful. Often novices opt for something that makes them feel like they did something harder and made them more sore. This is why almost everyone will remain a novice for life, going off of how I feel about doing a set of 5 instead of doing what I need to. They refuse to stick to the program that is the best for their current training level, and as a result, are choosing to stay a beginner for life. Intermediates can get a significant cardio stimulus from their training. Ask any intermediate that's done a heavy ass set of 5 sets, or a heavy ass workout of 5 sets of 5 squats or deads with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes rest. And they will tell you the cardio involved is tremendous. Again, this is because they possess the physical and mental capabilities to truly lift weights that are extremely challenging. Whereas the novice can't trust their own form won't break down or that they won't get hurt, let alone push themselves to the point of exhaustion under a PR set of 5 back squats. So the main takeaway here, let yourself be a beginner. It is the fastest way to advance. You don't want to be intermediate. You don't want to be advanced. Intermediate means much harder work for much longer for a slower rate of progress. Overtraining for intermediates is much more of an issue than novices. The reason for that is because a novice can show up hungover, tired, haven't eaten, and still set a PR. That's because of the novice effect that I was illustrating earlier. When you're off the couch or you're untrained or you're very early in your journey, almost anything will work under any circumstances. Doesn't work that way for intermediate. Becoming overtrained as an intermediate may take a full 1 to 2 weeks to fix and to get back to making progress. While possible, it's still a possibility, while unlikely, but still possible, that the intermediate lifter is not recovering well versus overtraining. But usually by the time you're an intermediate, you're taking your recovery pretty seriously. The ideal amount of time for any intermediate lifter to train in a session or to train in a week is ideally 3 to 4 times a week for 45 to 75 minutes, depending on their athletic ability, height, weight, age, all those other factors. So to sum up here, it's very, very difficult for novices to overtrain because of the novice effect. Now that can happen. If you're a novice and you do an advanced program one day and you don't sleep, eat, all this stuff, you could be sore for 2 weeks. That is way too much exercising, not nearly enough recovery. But if we take someone with the average lifestyle, they sleep almost enough, they eat almost enough, they drink almost enough water, average lifestyle. A novice goes to the gym on Monday, they're recovered by Wednesday, and they can set a PR. The novice effect is very powerful. Anything works when you're a beginner. If you're in your first 2 months of training, 3 months of training, doing anything, it's going to work. You can't judge something's effectiveness based on if it works in the beginning. You have to judge that thing's effectiveness based on if it works for years at a time. And if you understand your training level, you can do a program. If you're a ranked novice, novice, advanced novice, beginner, intermediate, intermediate, or advanced intermediate, you can do a program tailored to that training level at exactly the right time So that way you don't plateau and you continue making progress. It's my personal opinion. I think only about 1% of people that are ever in the gym actually become an intermediate. And like I said, that's regardless of how strong you are. There are novices that will be able to squat 3 sets of 5 at 400. Those are extremely gifted athletes, but they used beginner programming to get to 3 sets of 5 at 400-pound squats. That's still a beginner, but there may be a 70-year-old woman that is 5 foot tall, 110 pounds that has to use intermediate or advanced programming to get to 150. The latter example of the 70-year-old woman is significantly more advanced, even though she's much weaker than the gifted 400-pound male football player. What level of training advancement you are, again, it has nothing to do if you have a PhD, has nothing to do if you've been reading like crazy, if you have all kinds of certifications. It has nothing to do if you squat 600 or you squat 100. It has to do with the individual organism and what it took to get them to adapt to training. If you're a beginner and you can take your beginning training phase into 3, 4, 5, 600-pound squats, you're a gifted athlete. The exact same person, but maybe they're a terrible athlete, may only be able to take their novice training into the twos before they have to switch. But someone is more advanced in their training when they actually move on to a more advanced training style, not because they happen to be stronger than someone else. If I have to go through being a beginner, intermediate, and advanced to squat 500 pounds, and there's some freak football athlete out there, and on his novice programming, he gets to squat 500, I am significantly more advanced because of what I had to go through. That person, by definition, is still a beginner and should stay on that beginner programming as long as they possibly can. Next, we'll talk about the advanced. So when you reach the advanced training levels, for me, there's just advanced. Of course, there are better advanced lifters than others, but due to the asymptotic nature of the progress in the gym, i.e. the law of diminishing returns, you go from PRing 3 days a week to once every 2 weeks to once every 4, 6, 8, 12 weeks. There really isn't beginner advanced, intermediate advanced, advanced. There's just advanced. There's not a big difference between someone that is, at least in programming and lifestyle, between someone that's advanced and someone that's a really, really, really good advanced lifter. Now, like I mentioned, I might do something else on a treatment on someone that gets elite, but that's more a statement of genetics, winning the genetic lottery and being at an elite level more so than it is there being different levels of advance. So there's rank novice, someone totally off the couch, hasn't done anything, a novice, probably your average person in the gym, advanced novice. There's a lot of people who have been in the gym training for 7 years that are advanced novice and will never reach intermediate. Then we have beginning intermediate, advanced intermediate. And there's a specific type of training you should do for each level based on all of these self-evident factors. I'm not making this up. These are just things that have been pointed out in other people's works that I've taken and put into this format. They're self-evident truths about biological organisms. If you take a bacteria that, can't live in 71-degree temperature and it lives in 65-degree temperature, if you try to get it to adapt to a higher temperature and you just say, well, let's make it adapt faster, let's put it in that 71 degrees, you're going to kill all the bacteria. That's what people do to themselves with exercising. If it can live at 65 degrees and you want it to adapt, what do? You make small changes frequently. You go from 65 degrees to 65.1 to 65.2. And if you're going to get diminishing returns to that. That organism would adapt quickly and pretty easily to small changes. If you continue trying to force that organism to adapt over time, it will, given the jumps are manageable based on its level of adaptation over time. But you can't take that and just plop it in 80-degree temperature and say, well, we want it to be advanced, right? Follow the analogy. We'll just have it do an advanced program. So back up where I was, due to the asymptotic nature of progress in the gym, it's a law of diminishing returns. The more effort you put into the gym, you get less progress per amount of effort, the more progress you make. There's just not a big enough difference between advanced lifters to separate the subcategories. Advanced lifters are trying to get their last 10% of progress that they possibly can. And if you're at 92% of your potential, it doesn't require different training than if you're at 94% of your potential. Whereas a beginner, novices are probably from 0 to 50%. And so if you're at 0% of your potential, yeah, you should be training differently than if you're at 45% of your potential. And same for intermediates. If you're at 50% of your potential and 80% of your potential, yeah, you got to be training differently. But if you're trying to get that last 5 or 10%, advanced lifters generally need to change the same. Almost no one will ever become advanced, even if you want to. But that's not because it's like you have to squat 800 to become advanced. In theory, you could be a novice and squat 800. All you would have to do is add 5 pounds to your squat 3 days a week and get to 800. No one's done that, but it's in theory, it's possible. And you would still be a beginner because you would be utilizing beginner training. Most people will never come advanced even if they want to. One, because they don't follow the appropriate programs, but also life can just decide to have other plans for you. You need to have a significant dedication to the long-term prioritization of sleep, hydration, nutrition, and stress management to even have a chance. And that's not considering the impact of getting an injury. And that's not because training is dangerous, but if you've been training for 10 or more years consistently, you have a lot more opportunities to get injured, especially as you age. But factor in time off for work, travel, marriages, babies, illness, funerals, medical condition, going out occasionally and not getting enough sleep every once in a while. These are all things that stack up against you and the odds of becoming advanced. Impossible? No. Likely? Yes. The odds are just lower given that most people are attempting advanced programs as novices. And obviously, this is a disaster for people, as I've shown. An advanced program will not work for a novice. I can't say it enough times. And doing an advanced program doesn't make you advanced. You can't skip a phase. You cannot skip a training level. It results in injury, incredible soreness, fatigue, plateaus, and honestly, quitting. Oftentimes blaming genetics when it's either bad choices, bad coaching, or both. The advanced training level requires significant dedication to training, oftentimes resulting in 8+ hours per week in the gym on the low side. For most people, this just isn't practical, and it's not worth it unless you're a professional lifter. Notice how I said lifter and not an athlete. Almost no athletes in professional sports at all. Whether you're a football player or a sumo wrestler, it doesn't matter. You will not become an advanced lifter. The stress of lifting would be so much, it would take away from you being able to actually practice and perform said sport. Almost no one becomes an advanced lifter. And you don't need to be a professional athlete to become an advanced lifter. Your training level, as I've said in this, I'll continue to say it again, is not a measure of your ability. It's of the output that you have. It's not a measure of squatting 500 pounds. It's a measure of when everything's done correctly, what type of training do you need to advance the most efficiently? So you could be an advanced lifter and squatting 250, whereas the pro football player is a novice and squats 500. The pro football playing novice is a novice lifter, even though they're way stronger than the advanced person. Lifters at the advanced levels all share a few characteristics, okay? They can only PR once every 4 to 12 weeks. And again, that's not a choice. They physically can't do it, even if they do every single thing right. And by the time you become advanced, you are doing every single thing right. So they need to utilize periodization to get results. Periodization is one of the most overused, unnecessary methods of programming in existence in the world today. The range and scope of lifters and athletes that need it is extremely narrow, but it's being applied very widely. Of course, it's complicated, it's advanced, so everyone wants to do it. Lifters want to do it for the fun and the ego boost, and coaches want to do it because they're fancy and high quality and have degrees and certifications. None of that matters. For those unfamiliar, periodization is a programming methodology that involves a loading phase, a taper, or a peaking phase. This essentially takes the 2-day cycle for beginners, a workout which builds fatigue, a rest day to adapt, and then a Wednesday or that third day to set a PR, or a full week for intermediates where you're building fatigue on a Monday through Wednesday, recovering on Thursday, and displaying that PR on Friday. For advanced, we're taking that and we're stretching it out over the course of 4 to 12 weeks. An example could be heavy 5 sets of 5 back squats Monday, light squats Wednesday, medium squats 5x5 on Friday for 4 weeks. Then you're tapering, lowering the intensity for a week, and then having Tuesday and Thursday be very light and doing a set of medium squats the following Tuesday, and then a PR on Friday or Saturday. That was 6 weeks or longer to set a single PR. If you are intentionally doing a 6-week program to set a single PR when you could set 18 in that same time period, you will never advance beyond beginner because you cannot set enough PRs in 6-week blocks to go from novice to intermediate, let alone from intermediate to advanced. And that is a huge reason why doing an advanced program is responsible for keeping 10, 15, 20-year and lifetime beginners in the gym, no matter how hard they work. The more advanced you are, the longer each period needs to be, potentially 8 weeks, 12 weeks, or 16 weeks to muster a single small PR. A side note on this, it has the potential to work for a novice and an intermediate due to the novice effect. I could probably do an advanced program if I'm a novice and set some small PR every 6 weeks, but I should be PRing 3 times a week. I would be PRing 18 times slower. If I can set 3 PRs a week for 6 weeks and I don't because I want to do an advanced program and set 1 PR, I'm advancing 18 times slower, and that is not overcomable. That is not overcomable to set enough of those PRs to become intermediate. There is a ton of progress being left on the table. And the potential to work, it's extremely high volume at certain points, potentially resulting in extreme soreness that can't be recovered from, increased injury risk, and a higher likelihood of falling off given a taper week is very low training, very low volume training. Advanced lifters rest as long as they need to fully recover from each set. If cardio or endurance is the limiter in how much weight you can lift, then you're training cardio or endurance. These are always competitive lifters with extreme amounts of dedication to their sport. Overtraining is extremely dangerous, and this could take an entire cycle of 4 to 12 weeks to fix. The likelihood that an advanced lifter is struggling with recovery due to lifestyle factors is practically zero. Depending on age, height, weight, and athletic ability, most advanced lifters will benefit the most from training 4 to 5 times a week for 60 to 120 minutes. There is a human physiological limit, speed limit, to how fast you can improve. If you're a beginner, you can't just train 20 hours a week to try to become advanced. There is a speed limit. And when you intentionally do an advanced training program, the speed limit to PR meaningfully is every 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 10 weeks or 12 weeks. If you're a novice, the speed limit is PRing 3 or 4 times a week. If you intentionally skip ahead to intermediate or advanced, you are intentionally going slower than what your body would allow you to do, probably without knowing it. Almost no one is taking into account training levels nearly enough. Briefly, I'm going to cover why am I not progressing training levels. Okay, so here's the top 5 reasons people get stuck. Recovery at all training levels is important, but it becomes more important the more you progress through the training levels. It's so common to see a novice get stuck and then hear, this isn't enough training for me to improve. When that person is so often coming to the gym hungover, underfed, dehydrated, tired, and stressed, that's not the program's fault. It's lifestyle fault. Do not advance training levels when that happens. Being hungover, underfed, dehydrated, tired, and very stressed out is not a way to progress. And looking at a beginner program and your lifestyle choices and going, well, the problem must be my training is not advanced enough. And doing a more advanced training program, which requires even more recovery, and putting that on top of being hungover, underfed, dehydrated, tired, and stressed out is a fool's errand. You just have to recover. Now, nutrition. Being in a caloric surplus is the most important aspect of getting strong. So nutrition doesn't end up being as big of a deal for people with excess body fat as far as progress is concerned. This is because they have additional calories stored on their body that they can use to make up for a caloric deficit. If you are skinny or lean or reasonably lean already, you need to eat more. It's very common to see a skinny person complain about needing more advanced training when they aren't improving. When the reason that they're not improving and adding muscle is because they aren't eating enough to build muscle. Muscle has mass and weight. And obviously, building muscle then involves gaining weight. Next, if you're on the wrong training level, a beginner on an intermediate or an advanced program will struggle mightily to progress. But oftentimes, this is what people think progressing is like. They think that it has to be incredibly impossibly hard and they have to be killing themselves in the gym so they don't ever change anything, not knowing that it could be so much easier. Other times people are trying to skip being a beginner. I was super guilty of that. I was a gym owner and a beginner, and I've been training for 11 years. And I was always trying to skip to being advanced as fast as I could. And as a result, I stayed a beginner. Either way, skipping a training level ensures you will stay at the training level you're trying to skip. That's just how it works. Next is too much volume. So this happens especially when people get stuck or they're on a cutting diet. They want to reduce the intensity, i.e. the total weight on the bar, and just do tons of sets and reps, when the reality is they should be doing the opposite. You can lift very heavy without shutting down your recovery, so long as the total amount of weight lifted in a session is reasonable. So say you build to a heavy single and you do one work set of 300 pounds. Your total working tonnage for that session is just 300 pounds. Oftentimes, what everybody wants to do is, well, if I'm cutting or I'm trying to lose weight, I should reduce the intensity, i.e. I shouldn't squat 300, but maybe I'll do 5 sets of 5 at 225. It's a lighter weight. Therefore, it's less fatiguing. Wrong. Not true. The total training volume of 5 sets of 5 at 225 is 5,625 pounds. What do you think's harder to recover from? A single set of 300 pounds? And maybe even do a set of 5. A set of 5 at 300 for that day would be 1,500 pounds lifted. Obviously, it's the heavier weight will be easier to recover from and more beneficial. And it's more beneficial because it's easier to recover from. You can maintain your muscle mass. If you're constantly putting yourself in a recovery deficit, you're not going to improve. Here's a couple of reasons why people get stuck, but the reasons that they tell themselves they're stuck are BS. So number 1, not training intensely enough or hard enough. You wouldn't believe how many beginners and novices think this. And it's a total lack of self-awareness on one side, or just a genuine lack of knowledge, which I guess is a lack of self-awareness. I've seen many lifters surrounded by people much fitter than them that do way less training volume, and the beginners often pronounce this isn't enough for me. There's a human physiological speed limit for progress. And when you are new, that max speed limit comes with very low volume training. You don't need as much training to progress quickly when you're a beginner, and that's okay. You can't skip ahead and get progress faster by just deciding to do an advanced program. The too advanced and ego argument is very often weak people with lots and lots of exercise experience that think they're advanced just because they've been in the gym for a long time. And as I mentioned before, this has nothing to do with your training level. You can be a 10-year beginner. If you aren't willing to go back to a beginner program, you'll become a 15 or a 20 or a 25-year beginner. The next thing is genetics. So genetics certainly play a role, and the genetics 100% play a role if you're going to become elite, which I didn't cover that as a training stage here for that reason, because it's not in our control. When I was working out, and I've worked out 4, 5, 6 hours a day plus for 4 years, and I was still skinny. I never met anyone that spent more time in the gym than I did. I stayed a beginner. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that it was just my genetics. Other people were lucky. Other people that worked out less than me were just lucky. But it couldn't possibly have been that I was an idiot. It had to be something outside of my control. Overweight, skinny, weak, whatever the case is, it's not your genetics. Genetics can determine whether you become elite or not, but they do not determine if you can become an intermediate or even advanced. I'm sorry to say it, but it's you. It's not your genetics. So that's what I have for right now. I think I'm going to wrap up with a quick summary. Training levels and knowing what your training level is extremely important. Even if you've been in the gym for 3 years and you've been working hard, you probably would get much better results and advance much faster if you moved on to a beginner style of program. And you do that beginner style of program for 3, 6 to 9 months until there are clear biological and physiological reasons and evidence that you are not a beginner anymore. Very, very often at my gym or when I coach people online, I literally take people that are doing these ridiculous high volume advanced programs, strip them down to being a beginner, and they progress like they never have in their entire training careers. Be a beginner while you are a beginner, and you'll only be a beginner for 6 to 9 months. Try to skip ahead to save that 6 or 9 months, and you may end up being a beginner for 3 or 5 or 7 or 10 years or 15 years. I personally can say I was a beginner for 12 or 13 years, despite being in the gym more than anyone I know or knew at the time, working harder than anyone else I had ever met, and training people, coaching people with a bunch of certifications, a bunch of knowledge in the gym. I was obsessed with working out and training, but my results in the gym showed I was a beginner. And in order to try to overcome that, I did more and more advanced programs, thus ensuring that I would stay a beginner. It wasn't until I was 25 or 26, I had been a gym owner for a year or two at that point, that I stumbled across a book called Practical Programming for Strength Training and Starting Strength by the Asgard Company and Mark Ripito, saying essentially this, that there are people that have been in the gym for a long time and are still beginners. And I was like, it's me. That was really, really hard and really painful for me to admit. A decade of training, a training obsession for obsessing over gaining knowledge, dozens and dozens and dozens of clients that I was helping in the gym, to realize that I was still a beginner. But when I was willing to admit I was a beginner, I have since now squatted upwards of 500 pounds, and I have no signs of stopping after being stuck in the low 200s for over 10 years. I was finally humble enough and willing to admit that I needed to do a beginner program and saw the positives, that I would be able to PR 3 days a week, That's when I really started to figure things out, and I was able to get strong and put on an appreciative amount of muscle. I've seen that and done that for dozens and dozens of people, coaches or members or whomever you are. Do the level of training that you are. And remember, these are not opinions. Okay. A novice is a novice because it's self-evident. The biology of a novice allows them to PR 3 days a week or 4 days a week. It's not my opinion. I'm not making that up out of nowhere. It is self-evident. It matches the phenomenology. It matches what actually happens in the gym. If you have excellent recovery and you have excellent form and you've got some mental strength and you train Monday and you physically cannot PR Wednesday, that is biology at a cellular level telling you that it needs more time to recover in order to be able, but you should be able to do that by Friday. And you do everything right, and that timeline gets extended. You do everything right. You do a heavy squat session on Monday. You've done everything right for the next 2 weeks, recovery wise, stress management, hydration, nutrition, and you just can't set that PR 2 weeks later. You may be advanced. Tempting to PR every 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 weeks, doing a program like German volume training or the Bulgarian method when all of those people were elite genetic freaks and on steroids. So you could try to not be a beginner as a fool's errand, and you're leaving a tremendous amount of easy progress. Keep training levels in mind. For now, please, if you've listened all the way this far, make sure you like, subscribe. I own an in-person training gym, Spark Fitness. You can look it up. We're in Los Angeles and North Hollywood. SparkFitness.com. We train people online, in person. Reach out to me if you have questions. I'll see you on the next episode.